Starting. Okay, we're on.
We're on?
We're on.
Hello everybody, this is Julie Zommers and welcoming Alison Monaghan from Happy Soul, and I'm Julie Zommers from trulymadlydeeplyhappy.com, and today we're going to be talking about the clients we've had on our couch this week. So this series is called On the Couch, and we're pretty excited about this, aren't we, Ali?
We certainly are. I think it's a fabulous idea.
Yeah, we've been talking about it for a while, and the intention behind it is that we talk about people's breakthroughs, I guess, of people that we're working with using EFT and matrix re-imprinting, and of course we'll be honouring people's privacy. We're not going to be using people's names, and of course we've asked permission, so I don't want anyone to feel unsafe. Even while they're listening to it, you might be thinking, oh, what if I go to these guys and they start talking about me? It's only people who have allowed us to, because they want to share their stories in the hope that somebody will hear that story and it will resonate with them on some level, and therefore the thinking would be that it would motivate them to perhaps give EFT a go. And if not with us guys, there's a lot of EFT practitioners out there, so this is not about us. It's basically about motivating you out there to take action. So, Ali, thanks so much for coming on board, and I think this is going to be a lot of fun. So let's talk about a little bit, maybe give us a little bit of your background just briefly, and then talk about what's happening. Because this is the first On the Couch, I guess people need to know who we are. So you start.
Certainly, yeah. So as you know, I'm Alison Monaghan, and I'm incredibly passionate about life. And one of the reasons I think that I've become more passionate about life is from discovering something, as we know, called EFT, which is the tapping. And I've been sort of using this tool, if you like, for about nearly 8 years, I think, and I've made a business out of it, and I've enhanced my already great life, but it hasn't always been great. But it is quite magical now, and I've put a lot of that down to a lot of awareness and using the tool to release a lot of my negative emotions, I suppose. So yeah, I have a little boy who's 8, who's very primary in my life. But as I say, I'm also very passionate about my business and what I do, and that's my business is happysoul.com. So yeah, that's just a little summary of me and where I'm at in my life. I love working with people using the technique, and I also run workshops, soon to do my first women's retreats, which is very exciting, and I teach the technique as well. So as you can see, I'm all like you, Julie, very passionate about sharing this amazing tool and all the experience that I think collectively we have.
Yeah, beautiful. Okay, far away. Who have you had on your couch this week? And when we say couch, guys, Ali, I think you do have people coming to your practice in Sydney, in the North Beaches, but primarily most of my work's over Skype. So we use the word couch very liberally.
Yeah, I don't have people lying down on a chaise longue.
Yeah, that's exactly right. It's not the old Freud days. I think. Yeah. I think healing has taken on a very, very different form these days, that's for sure. So
it has. Thankfully, it has, yeah. So the person I'd like to share with you today, we'll give her the name Sarah. So like you said, Julie, this is completely confidential, if you like, and I've had her permission to share the session. We've just had the one session, and we are following up. So we're kind of in a flow, if you like, but we had some great results on the first session. So she's a lady who currently does use EFT in her life. She uses it at home when she's motivated, and that's another issue in itself, that often when you're left alone you don't tap. So she has had some good results, but she knew with this issue that it was one that was probably fairly deep-grained, and having that person to guide her to go to where the roots of it was what she thought would benefit her. So she came along to see me in Sydney. And actually, she said, I'm my life's pretty good, rah-de-rah-de-rah, but there's this thing that's been around for a long time that I would like to look at. And that issue for her was something that will be quite familiar to a lot of people. We call it OCD. So lots of checking, quite a bit of anxiety about not feeling safe. So when she was leaving the house, it would be a matter of going around several times checking that the power points were off, that the switches were off, and in particular that the gas, the electricity was off, that she hadn't left the stove on, and that she'd locked the door properly. So, after having a chat about how this affected her life and just trying to work out, I suppose, essentially when this began, so that we can try and travel back in time to see what was going on at that time in her life. It had been going on for, she thinks, about 11 years. But I asked her if she had a memory that was particularly strong about when it was very, very challenging for her, so that the anxiety was very high about having to check, so she was feeling very physically stressed and emotionally stressed. And she came up with actually a memory which was about 12 months previous. So with matrix reimprinting, it's not always necessary, as you know, Julie, to go right back to, baby days or, between the age of 0 to 7. Sometimes you need to go back to the previous week if it's been a very big event. But for this purpose, it went back about a year. And she remembered being at this stage in her life, waking up in the night and actually having to get out of bed. So it was disrupting her sleep. So she had to get out of bed. She had to go and check the power points, check that the stove was off, check that the doors were locked. And she was, when she was talking about it, I could tell that she was becoming a little bit anxious. So that was key to me to know that that was a good place to go in and start releasing some of the anxiety and the trauma, if you like, around it. And when I say trauma, it's not necessarily a massive thing like perhaps a car accident or some serious abuse. It can be a small event. So I suppose it depends on the perception of the person and how they digest that. So for her, it was about going back to this memory and, safely and gently. We did a few rounds of tapping before she went into the memory just to take the edge off. And then, without going into it all, we kind of stepped into this memory where she's feeling very anxious, feeling very frustrated and annoyed at herself as well for having to get out of bed because she was tired and cozy. But there was something driving her. There was a compulsion to have to do it, and that's often what it feels like for somebody who's got that kind of challenge in their life. So, we obviously did lots of tapping throughout that memory. And the key thing about it was to start looking as well, once we'd relieved some of the anxiety from her 12 months ago, which is what we call the echo, as you know, in matrix reimprinting. We'd relieved a lot of that. There was a lot of sighing, a lot of relaxation. And then my role was to actually start to identify what was the limitation for you around that time in your mind, what was the belief. So lots of things were being unraveled, and it was really amazing to watch her have these aha moments, and for me to just guide that process. She was coming to it all herself with my guidance. So she was realizing she has a partner, a long-standing partner, who was sleeping next to her, who was actually awake, and sounds like a very gentle soul. He wasn't annoyed about her getting up and out of bed. But what she realized was, and obviously this is a lot to do with control, needing to control her will, to feel safe. So there's a massive safety aspect here. But what she came to realize quite strongly throughout the session was that she was what we call, she kind of said, what did she say? Something about she was the man in the relationship. So she was the one who felt in an old-fashioned way, of course, that she was the one that had to look after them both. So she felt this very strong sense of having to take care of not only her, but her partner as well, because in her mind, he was the passive one, he was the more easygoing one, but also what eventuated, which she became quite frustrated and resented that he was like this. So all these new emotions, or not new, but these revelations for her were coming around. And so we worked through each one step by step, and she realized also within this, I suppose, beautiful circle of information, that she'd actually in some ways enabled him to be that way. So she felt quite sad that she'd put him in that box of you're a little bit weak and I'm the strong one and therefore I have to protect you. So again, working through the sadness that came with that, tapping through that, and we kind of put him in a bubble. She had a chat with him, and it was just...
just to interrupt, for people not familiar with matrix work, do you just want to explain that bubble thing a little bit more?
I will actually, yes. This is where I get excited, and it's good to remind me to just explain it. So basically, as you know, Julie, when you're working with the matrix reimprinting, a matrix reimprinting basically means that we get these imprints as we grow up from certain events in our lives, and beliefs can come from that. And the matrix being that it's all interconnected. So once we've worked through the trauma of the event, which has caused maybe the limiting belief, I often will get the client to say, okay, would you like to put mum in a bubble, or would you like to put dad in a bubble? And in this incident, would you like to put your partner in a bubble? So she said, yes, let's put him in a bubble. And I'll ask what the colour of the bubble is, and often it'll start off perhaps to be quite dark. And then we'll sort of reassure the person I'm working with that you feel safe. And is it now an opportunity for you to maybe release what you didn't on the day? So it's almost like we're suspending the person, we're protecting that person, but we're also protecting the person I'm working with so that she doesn't feel the energy coming, if you like. So it's like a separation whilst there's more work that can be done. So he's in the bubble, she's feeling the emotions, we're tapping through that, and then as she's tapping on herself, she's actually in her mind, you can say this out loud or in your mind, she's actually saying everything to him that she wished she could have said, maybe a little bit of stored up resentment, tapping through it. And then afterwards, she's then feeling this huge amount of love and unconditional love and sort of release. So at that point, I'm asking, do you want to take him out the bubble? And she says, yeah, I'd love to take him out the bubble. So take him out the bubble.
Yeah. I was going to say, I cannot believe the difference when people actually get to say, when we're doing matrix work, when people actually get to say to people what they really want to say, what they wanted to say back then. And you might think, well, a lot of people might think, well, it doesn't really change what happened, but it does change how it sits with you in your body. I remember I had this client once, and she had got to, sorry to interrupt, but this is
no, go ahead.
But she'd got to the hospital just as she had a call that her father was really ill. She'd better get to the hospital sort of pronto. And when she got there, one of her father's friends was in the car park, and he said that was bad timing, but he's still warm. And this was such a massive trauma to her because of the way she was told her father had died. And it was such a callous thing. And so there was things that she wanted to say to that guy, and he was probably in shock anyway. It was a lifelong friend. And there were things that she'd wanted to say to her dad before he passed. So we went back to that scene, and the same thing, we brought her dad back alive again. She just spoke to him. I have no idea what she said because she did it silently.
Yes.
And the relief I was working with her on Skype, and the relief on her face, her whole face softened. And you notice that sometimes? Just that.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a beautiful physical shift. Yeah.
It's like people look 10 years younger. It's just like, I finally got to actually say what I wanted to.
Yeah.
And it's the power of just being able to do that. So back to your story. So you're getting him out of the bubble now.
Yes, thank you. No, I think it's really good to have these little moments, Julie, where we relate to things, because what we want, as you know, is to share with people that even though it might sound a little clunky or complicated, it's actually quite straightforward. So yes, what I wanted to say also is sometimes what happens is, of course, the colour of the bubble changes before they come out. So it might be dark, and then it might go obviously to a softer pink, and then you kind of can tell a little bit, okay, they're ready to come out. So once he was out of the bubble, there was this reunion and all sorts of things I assumed happened. And like you said, this is all done privately. I'm just suggesting you can do this in your mind, you can do it out loud, whatever works for you. So I often find with clients they do all of this in their head because we can be very visual when we close our eyes. So this all took place, and there was I think there was a lot of peace and understanding about their relationship in that moment, and a lot of compassion. for her partner and for herself, for holding this responsibility to have to take care of them both. So it was I think for her it was a massive shift, and we kind of finished off what we needed to do in that memory. And once she'd come out, she was feeling a lot more relieved. She was feeling really relaxed. She, like you said, she was sighing. She was like, oh wow, I didn't realize I'd done that. I didn't realize I'd identified myself as that one. But what was really key as well was it actually went right back, of course, to when she was little, and she was always the responsible one in the family. So she'd kind of carried it through. So just to complete this, so once we'd obviously worked through a lot of these issues and the feelings and the limiting belief that she was the one that felt unsafe, and the reason she felt unsafe was because she also thought it was too much responsibility. There's testing that's needed, and this is the interesting thing with tapping, isn't it, Julie, that sometimes we can get all excited and go, oh, it's great, and we've resolved this, or they've resolved it with our help. And if you don't test, you can be led to think that everything's fine and dandy, and sometimes it's not. So it's very important sometimes to test. So we kind of went back to the memory of her originally in the bed, and feeling very anxious and compelled to get up, and she didn't. In the memory, she was just going back to sleep with a partner. She was relaxed. I asked her if she could imagine having to get up and check, and she said there was no need to, there was no danger. So that was beautiful. And then coming out into the live one-on-one with each other out of the memory, again, I asked her to look down at some power switches, and this was actually quite hilarious because under my little table in my session room, I've got a pile of wires, and it actually looks really dangerous to somebody probably who would ordinarily feel quite anxious. And so this is the really beautiful cognitive shift that people have. She looked down at this bundle of wires, and I was kind of laughing inside, going, oh, pull this one off if she looks and goes, ah. So she looked at the wires, and she just kind of went, it kind of just looks like a plug and some wires. And I said, okay, and how do you feel about that? It looks a little bit dangerous maybe. She goes, no, it just looks like a plug and some wires. And I said, do you feel compelled to do anything about it? Like maybe flick the switch so to make sure it's, And she was very calm. No, it just looks like a plug and some wires, And again, you'll know this, Julie, won't you? When we work with people, that amazing, beautiful shift that happens that sometimes they're not even aware of.
Yeah.
And you might gently remind them, well, actually, in the beginning, you couldn't even walk past the switch without feeling like you needed to turn it off.
Yeah.
So I checked in with her the next day, and she wrote me an absolutely beautiful sort of testimonial, actually, and said that she was feeling really at peace, really great, much calmer, and she's now looking forward to another session I've got with her this week, actually. We might have to go back and do something, and I'll properly check in about how she's been feeling. But she's just more open now to more magic in her life, I suppose, because with the letting go of that need to feel you've got to check and the safety issue, there's more freedom, isn't there, to be more relaxed and less in control.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think there's a couple of really good points that you've made there. How long was the session, by the way?
An hour. So generally my sessions do go for an hour. And I'll always follow up with people, and as I say, sometimes it's important to highlight this, actually, that it's not always a one session wonder, and I do suspect when she comes back there might be some tail enders, if you like, or there might be some other remaining feelings of anxiety about things, but I don't know until I see her, so it'll be interesting to follow up with our podcast another day to see how she's going.
No, thanks for sharing that story. That was really good. Yeah, a couple of points that you made. Definitely, it's not always a fast process.
No.
I mean, because there's been so much in the press and everything about, oh, this is just the most amazing thing. People are getting rid of phobias in, 5 minutes. Yeah, look, do you know what? I have had that experience where I've got rid of a lifelong phobia in this woman who had she had a water phobia. She couldn't go in the water above her waist. And we did get rid of that. It was like 45 minutes. And it was
fantastic, yeah.
But there's been other things like, I'm working with an anorexic patient at the moment, and that's, we've been working together for about 3 weeks. But when you compare it to mainstream therapy, it is fast. There's no question. It's a lot faster. I mean, people spend, years on the couch on the couch, the name of our program.
They, they do.
But they do, like the whole American thing, you know, where people, you know, it's sort of almost woven into their, I don't know what the word is, that, you know, everyone has a therapist in America, you know, and they just see them everywhere. What I was going to say before about when you said that she's coming back because now she's had that gleeful feeling of, my gosh, if I got rid of this, then what about the other stuff that's floating around? What I always say to my clients is that it's just like we've got all these little people, and they might be us even just a year ago, but former versions of ourselves, they're all lined up inside of us. And when one of them is at the top of the queue and says, look, I really am sick of holding on to this, you know, OCD thing, I want to be fixed, you know, and I sort of think it's like that. It's like this piece of energy or this little person holding on to this stuff. It says, like, I'm ready to let it go. And so they come to someone like you, you know, the person holding all these other people comes to you and they get rid of, they find a huge relief. And that little person at the top of the queue goes, yay! And then when they disappear from the top of the queue, there's something else at the top of the queue. And that's sort of a, you know, there's another little person going, my turn.
Yeah.
And it's not like we're opening a can of worms when we start to work with people, but it is very interesting how that happens. You know, to me, it's very interesting. So somebody will come to you with one issue, and then you'll have a couple of sessions. They go, wow, I just feel so fantastic. And they, do I need to come back? And I go, always go, it's up to you.
Yeah.
If they do come back, they'll say, well, it's really interesting because now there's other things come up.
Yes.
Do you find that?
Absolutely. And it is, I suppose we used to call it peeling the onion. And I still use that analogy, actually, because it is like that. And that's where I think in the old style of therapy, it could be quite draining. And there's a perception of, oh, not more stuff. But I think the beauty of the tapping, using the tapping on the meridians, is it has a very calming effect. So even though it can be quite a big release and it can be sometimes a little tiring, most of the time I'd say that people have that sense of feeling more grounded and at peace, and also that will then therefore give them the momentum to go, right then, okay, what next, instead of, oh no, not more.
Yes,
so
that's exactly what it's like. It's like, yippee.
Yeah.
You know, if I can feel this good, how much better can I feel if when I get rid of that bit?
Yeah, that's it. Totally. Yeah. Yes.
How are we doing for time, Ellen?
We are. It's 10:40.
So how long have we been on? Do you know?
I think we've probably been on about.
Isn't it counter at your end or something?
I'm looking actually to see the time.
We're both challenged on Google Hangouts at this
Yeah,
stuff.
I think it's been about 20 minutes, something like that.
Mm.
Yeah.
I'm wondering.
Sorry, Julie, I can't see with all this technology stuff. I'm learning like you as I'm going, and I can't actually see. It's funny, isn't it? I can't see if there's no timer, but there probably is somewhere.
By the time we get to session 30 of On the Couch, we'll be dab hands at it, you know. We'll just for anybody wanting to get in touch with us too, Ali, your details.
Yes, so the best way to get in contact with me is probably through my website, which is happysoul.com, and that's with an I, so HAPPI, soul.com. And I've got all my contact details on there. And my mobile number 0411 474754.
And that's Australia, of course. So
that is Australia, but like yourself, I work with people all over the world using Skype as well. So it's just opened up an amazing amount of accessibility, hasn't it?
Mm. And even just to go along, you know, you can get there via Ali's page, and the same with mine, trulymadlydeeplyhappy.com. Gosh, we've got a bit of conflict this morning. There's planes going over, Ali, and it's thundering and raining outside. So I hope everyone...
But we did it.
We did it.
Can I just say something just quickly before we finish, Julie? Yeah. To our listeners, it was one of those typical things that we got quite frustrated with the technicalities of setting it up. There was a few updates with Google Plus. And our normally very, very savvy Julie Zommers was even challenged herself. And I saw just a moment of just the old tap, tap, tap.
I did have a tap.
Again, you can use it in any given moment.
Yeah. I just, it's just, you think you just know it inside out, and then the platform changes, and
Yeah.
it's like, ah. But anyway, tap, tap, tap.
Yeah.
Um, what I was going to say, yeah, even if people want to get into a conversation, we've both got Facebook pages, and, I don't feel like we're competitive at all. I think we're good
No.
mates. We support each
Nice.
other.
Yeah.
So it doesn't really matter where you go, but it's good to sort of get into a discussion, just make a comment on the Facebook page about how you're feeling, or, ask a question. And we can always answer questions in this too, Ali.
Yeah.
Have a bit of a Q&A. If somebody sent us a question, we can address it in this On the Couch segment.
Yeah.
I was going to talk about someone on my couch this week, but you know what? I just think it might go on a bit long, so we might just do that next week. And that's about a woman who was absolutely stuck. And I always remember her. She actually had 8 sessions, and over 1 month, she was
Wow. Yeah.
so concerned about herself that she really, when we first started working together, she couldn't even make eye contact. She would just spend the whole time looking down, and it's just a joy to see her now flourishing. She started her own business.
Fantastic. Oh,
Yes,
that's great.
it was incredible, like 1 month,
Yeah.
and she just couldn't
Great.
believe herself. So I'll be talking about her next week, and no doubt talking about whoever you've seen.
Well,
It's
I look forward to hearing about that. And that's another good example, isn't it? That sometimes it takes, several sessions to get through lifelong, feelings in the body and the mind. And it's honouring that, isn't it? So I look forward to hearing about that.
Yeah, that'll be good. Okay, darling. Well, if you,
Okay.
if you can hit the
The big red button.
but we can keep talking and it won't be recorded.
Okay. Thanks, Julie.